generic, or are we trying to define like this is what zTunnel does, but you can disable it?
Ideally, DNS is secure and we don't have to deal with DNS. And there are APIs, there are all kind of, there is external DNS project that synchronizes services to a real DNS. There are all kind of, we are not in the business of defining APIs for DNS, I think. Accidentally with Service Entry, we kind of are, but that's something that we can address through other means too.
What I was really getting at was like, so if the platform is providing DNS, then that's a separate thing altogether, right? That's like, I think what we need to define here is if you enable like Ambient Mesh's DNS, this is what we do. Otherwise, the platform can do whatever the platform does, right? And we don't want to define that. That's up to the platform.
No, I'm saying, why would we enable ambient DNS? Because we do not trust that, if the platform doesn't have a secure DNS, then we need to enable ours. But if the platform does define a secure DNS, it's not our problem. It's wonderful.
Well, it's more than that though, right? Like it's yes, security, but also like maybe the platform doesn't connect all the Kubernetes clusters or doesn't provide VM access or we're meshifying things too, right? So potentially that meshification could be done by the platform as well, right? Like maybe like cloud DNS just knows all the things, and so all that's just done for you, and they've got security too, right? So built in, so we can just turn our DNS off and just use theirs potentially, right? So that's why I'm trying to like separate these two maybe deployment models. Like zTunnel and Ambient Mesh, they do this one very specific thing, but you can always disable that and use the platform. But we're not going to dictate what the platform does or how it works or that it uses XDS or anything like that, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And all platforms, not only cloud DNS, virtually all platforms have a DNS server and they have, pretty solid DNS with, split horizon and a lot of other features.
Right. Yeah, I was just using cloud DNS as an example.
Yeah. And it's not a bad choice to say, hey, platform should, we rely on the platform, but and the security provided by the platform. And if you don't have a platform, if you're on-prem or you don't have a secure DNS, then we that's the only case, and we can delay it. We don't have to do it now.
It sounds like we're all agreeing that you should be able to use Istio DNS or not, right?
Do we agree on what, John?
Like you should use the platform DNS or you should use Istio DNS, right?
I think my take is you should use platform DNS if you trust it.
Yeah, so there's two options. You use Istio DNS or you don't, right? Is there anyone disagreeing with that?
I'm just wondering, I wasn't following all the text on the side there. I don't know, is anyone making a more subtle point about like options within Istio DNS? Or is it just on or off?
I think there's debate on how exactly we implement it. But it doesn't seem like anyone's objected to the idea that there should be an implementation, and you may not need to use it depending on your requirements, right?
Yeah.
Which is the same as with sidecars today, right?
Which also implies we cannot rely on it. We cannot put features into DNS. DNS will be just return whatever is defined by the platform.
Very dumb CNI redirects if it needs to whatever you tell it to. It's just DNS.
Well, it has some functionality, right? Like Service Entry is probably going to be something that you only see on.
Right, but that's from the perspective of something that's being redirected. That's just another DNS record, right? It doesn't affect that we know that a Service Entry resolves to something is moot.
Yeah, and Service Entry, we started discussion in Gamma about extending MCS service export with custom domain names, and that whole kind of discussion. John probably can talk more about it. But that would be, synchronizing Service Entry into some Gamma or gateway APIs where we can interact with the platform DNS would be ideal. Yeah, I think it's not so controversial as I thought. So.
Okay, so the only sounds like the main point of discussion is the deployment then. Whether it's CNI, whether it's built into zTunnel, all that. Is that right, Costin?
Yeah, and I actually I don't think it should be in that CNI daemon set, because CNI daemon set is super high permissions, and that's not the right place. I was thinking CNI chart, because I consider DNS to be a platform feature, and CNI is kind of an extension of the platform CNI, which should provide DNS too. And if it's replaced by a vendor like Cilium or someone else, they would probably provide both DNS and network security in the same package. That's why I was saying, but not necessarily in the same, just a separate daemon set running Istio agent, really. But I'm okay if John wants to put it in a, in the zTunnel chart. That's fine with me as well.
So my general thought is like I'm fine with implementing something standalone. That's fine. The long-term optimal in terms of operations and performance is to implement it in zTunnel directly. So I have no issue doing short-term solutions, but
In
we
Rust,
don't want users to have 10 different daemon sets to do Ambient, right?
okay, separate container would work.
No, I mean, long-term optimal is one container in Rust, right? To have two binaries or two containers, there's overhead to that, right? It's both new XDS connections, it's more complex, uses a higher footprint.
I mean, we are, I think, going too far. I mean, why not assembly and, it's
not the fact that it's written in Rust, by the way. It's that we have one implementation, right? If you have two containers, then we have two images that we have to pull. Each binary is like 50 megabytes if you're using the agent. They have two separate XDS streams. They're out of sync, right? We have overlapping data requested. There's more load on the control plane to serve that, like, et cetera. Is it that high of a cost? No, it's not the end of the world. I have no problem doing it for the short term, but I do think that the long-term optimal is to do it in zTunnel directly.
For something that eventually most people will not use, because it's going to be a reliable platform. And most vendors, most cloud providers will have secure DNS.
Yeah, I think I agree with both points, to be honest. John, I agree with what you're saying, but to Costin's point, if maybe people use it for a little while and then they just realize, oh, why are we doing this? Let's just use the platform. I don't know. I suspect that the vast majority of people are just going to use platform eventually. I mean, that would be the goal.
But it's also on feature, right? So it's not like you always get it, right? So
when you're like super robot, crazy sound. I don't know. Something's wrong with your mic.
Lynn is in the matrix right now.
maybe I was.
Oh, now you're good.
But sorry about that. I was just saying it's an optional feature, right? So it's not like everybody will get it. It's an opt-in feature for same as the Istio DNS today. I think Ben wrote it's only enabled with DS capture enabled.
Yeah. Again, I think I was conflating two things all over again, like the what we offer for zTunnel, and hey, if you want to use the platform, just use the platform. So I'm wondering if like what we're trying to spec out here should really just be the thing we implement in zTunnel, like whether or not it ends up actually being part of like the Rust code or ends up being some kind of patched together thing with another co-process, i.e. Istio agent. Like we can work out those details, but I think fundamentally it's the same thing, right? Even if it's really two processes. So if that's, that could be the thing that we say, this is going to be ambient DNS. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. We'll just take DNS from the platform. Otherwise, we need to have that discussion of like exactly how do we and why do we want to separate it out. If the goal is of separating it out is to say this is actually part of the network infrastructure and this is part of zTunnel, to separate those two things out, then why are we doing the network infrastructure stuff, right? I don't know. It's if those are two different teams, then we should only be doing the, you know, the mesh stuff that sits on top. I don't know. Does any of that make sense, or am I just muddling things further?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to be part of zTunnel, and it also simplifies users' operation, right? If they are enable this was not enable this, so it will just be a future flag for the user.
Ben, did you have any thoughts with respect to like for ambient DNS, like how it should be deployed?
Kevin can speak to some of this because he has opinions, but I think we're sort of aligned in that we like the sidecar thing seems simplest versus another daemon set. I do agree that Istio DNS is kind of heavy, right, and has its own workload, API, and state and crap like that. That we may, it might be a good impetus to like maybe make it easier to just use the DNS component and maybe ignore some of that other stuff, right? That might be, it might be a good push to do that generally, but. Yeah, I do agree that's a concern though, but I think it's also something we could do in the short term pretty simply and see how it goes. And I do believe that generally we want people to use the platform unless their platform is just not capable of doing what they need to do.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think separating the DNS clearly as a feature throughout the whole, you know, product would probably be a good thing. I'm not sure how much work that would take or what exactly needs to be done there, but it's, I mean, I generally agree with the thought there.
Yeah, and like even if we, again, I kind of don't want to write a DNS implementation in Rust and put it in zTunnel, right? If the outcome of that is like, oh, we need to separate the DNS stuff and it's like a standalone Rust process, and we maybe put it next to zTunnel. That's whatever. We can. I don't care about that. But like, I want zTunnel to be ignorant of DNS, as that process should not care. Is my initial thought anyway.
Keep in mind when we say DNS implementation, we're not talking about low-level implementations, right? Like the Go-based one we have is about 60 lines, right? We just process a DNS request, and if we know, we respond with the record, and if we don't, we forward it. So it's fairly straightforward. Like in my mind, zTunnel already has all the infrastructure to capture users' traffic and get it to zTunnel. We already have all the data we need to serve DNS because we're already getting it for XDS for other reasons. And it's already deployed in a manner that it's highly available, scaled up for increasing load, et cetera. That's already suitable to be on the data path. So to me, it feels very logical to put it there.
Okay, so it sounds like there's really only a maintenance concern, right, about putting it in zTunnel or not. And if the maintenance concern can be met,
yeah,
then it's probably reasonable. It's preferable generally to have a single deployable unit and a single testable unit than to have multiple.
And
If it can't be met, yeah, right. If it triples the size of the zTunnel and has all kinds of other effects on libraries consumed and security footprint, then it doesn't meet the maintainability threshold, and it should be separated. So I guess somebody gets to prove the point.
Yep. Do you agree with that, Kautsun?
Yeah, no, I'm starting. Now I realize that we also have the PTR, the metadata service discussion in the past, which there is a solution based on HTTP. But if we put some DNS into zTunnel, we could answer PTR directly, and it will be much more efficient. And so yeah, I'm on board now.
All right, so we have a budget. Does anybody want to hypothesize what the budget is in terms of complexity?
Oh, it's super simple.
All right.
Did I say that, and I didn't realize, or was
John said 60 lines of Go code. So,
honestly, it will probably end up being a bit more.
Right.
But I don't think it's terribly complicated unless the Rust libraries are a lot lower level than the.
All right. How about this? It doesn't increase the size of the Rust binary footprint by more than 10%.
Well, I would even say like maybe, you know, it should be an optional component so you can build with or without this thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a nice feature of Rust.
Yeah, no objection to that. Vendors are going to want a vendor anyway, so
yeah,
make that possible. Also good practice for that. So
Yeah, I think that's fine. And I mean, if we find out it's actually absurdly hard to do in Rust for whatever reason, then I certainly will change my mind. I don't want to have a maintenance nightmare. So it looked like, I don't know, Nate, you, and I think I did, but then forgot, explored the libraries out there. And there's a pretty good one that's backed by a bunch of people that have a lot of money, like Google and I forget who else. What's it, Proximos? There's some company that kind of is backing a lot of these security networking things for Rust.
Proximo is like I don't think it's a company. I think it's like an overarching effort that is being collaborated on to build out a bunch of things, including the DNS proxy. I think it's like Trust DNS or something. I think is the name of it.
Yeah. And they also maintain the Rust TLS. So my main point really is that this DNS stuff, that they have pretty hardened support in Rust. It's not some obvious library that we're going to be sticking on.
One thing I want to clarify here, Lina, I think you mentioned in the past, in Istio DNS, normally today, we have this split horizon mode where depending on who's asking, you may get different answer because it's per pod. And I think we are agreeing that if we put it in zTunnel, and we are not going to have this functionality, it will be honest, one DNS to answer all, no overrides or.
Yeah, I remember a few weeks ago, I think there was an issue that discussed in this meeting, right, about getting consistent resolution regardless which cluster you are in. I think there is a flag. Somebody is proposing to change their behavior. Was this related to that, Carsten?
No, it's basically if you are in namespace 1 and you have a destination rule and some servicing, import, export, whatever with service entries, and in a different namespace, same name, you have different combination, you will get different responses to DNS lookup if you use Istio DNS. But with zTunnel, if both pods are in the same node, you'll get exactly one answer, and it will. But that's again part of the sanitization of the API surface.
Yeah, that makes sense because zTunnel handles more than one workloads, right, for all the co-located pods. Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily know the differences between the different namespaces. Yeah.
It will be like external DNS, like if you have a real DNS where you will not have different responses based on who's asking. Normally.
Does the I forget the API between Istio agent and the control plane. Are hosts and their endpoints loaded lazily? Or
in the agent one, we have this name table API.
Okay.
And we just dump that in. I'm
so
almost positive that we can implement the same thing with the workload API. Not the one that we have today because we don't have the host names actually. But I don't know if you've seen, we have kind of the next steps for that API. And I believe that everything in there should meet the needs. The only thing that I think might be, I'm pretty sure we can figure it out, but we just made me a slight tweak, is that in Kubernetes, you can resolve like the full name or like the name, that namespace, like there's all the variants. So I know we have some support for that in the current DNS API, but I think we can do it with what we have.
So just to be clear, you're saying that it wouldn't be hard to implement kind of like an on-demand approach to DNS, so that we wouldn't have to basically download the entire mesh.
Not just that, there's actually no need to implement any control plane aspect of this. zTunnel already has all this information. All we need to do is implement the DNS server that looks at that.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like we already have in some map somewhere, or we will, like host name to IP address. So we just need to look up and then pump down the response. I mean, in practice, I'm sure it's slightly more complicated than that.
Well, we also have on demand. So basically, if small meshes will have it already in memory because that's what workload discovery service is doing. For larger measure, we still have the option to do on demand sometimes.
That's a good point. So today we actually only have on demand for IP addresses, whereas this is the inverse. We need on demand for host name, but we can easily add that. So as part of the XDS doc, we're kind of aligning on each resource having actually multiple aliases that you can query it by. So you could look it up by the IP address, or you could look it up by the host name and get the same response. So I think that's well aligned. We should just make sure we explicitly call that out.
That's why I like having it in the Z-tunnel. I mean, that's the main benefit is that you already have the database. You don't need to do extra lookups.
So when you say have it in the Z-tunnel, I think the discussion has been, there are two ways, right? One is as a sidecar, as a standalone Istio DNS container, and running as a sidecar to the Z-tunnel. And I think later on, the discussion has shifted to why are we not implementing that functionality in Rust? So it would be part of Z-tunnel within the same process and within the same container. Is that what we
Yeah,
are more
I think
leaning towards?
we agreed. I mean, at least I'm convinced with what John was saying to put it in Rust and be done with it for the various reasons. So I don't think anyone else is saying to put it in agent, to leave it in agent at this point.
Okay. And I think also that backs to what Louis was saying to measure the complexity and the overhead. Yeah.
Well, if we put it in agent, we know it will be 10 times. If it's 10 times lower than the overhead of the agent, I think it's a win.
Yeah.
Cool. So I assume this came up because of a kind of a preliminary requirements doc I put together and shared with John and Costin just to get some early feedback. I'll kind of update that based on this conversation, and maybe we can just present that next week or next time.
That sounds good. Do we have any other topic today?
Just a clarification. I don't know if my point about the MDS replacement is clear to everyone. We discussed some time ago. We discussed about Z-tunnel exposing some API for workloads to find out the peer information because the certificate is lost and you no longer know if you are a workload, you want to find out who you are talking. We don't have something. And John had a in progress PR, which I don't know what is the status to expose this information to HTTP. But if we implement this DNS server, this allows us to expose it through the DNS protocol, either as TXT record or as PTR records. So if you have a peer IP, you can get the host name of the peer, which will be more efficient and it's. Any objections or
I didn't realize that's what you meant when you said PTR, as in like the literal PTR, not our PTR.
It will make our PTR more realistic because it will be really a PTR in DNS sense.
Yeah, I guess so. For the peer info thing, do we want to expose arbitrary info about? There's some security concern to exposing PTR, right? Like it's one thing to say this peer connected to me, what's their identity? Which we could kind of restrict to say you can only query things that are connected to you. And there's another, we may want to allow it, but
it could be TXT. I'm not, PTR is just kind of an example.
No, I don't mean the actual, not the shape, but what's the actual content like? Do we want to allow an arbitrary user in the mesh to say, what is this arbitrary IP and get all the information about it? Or is that private, right?
Whatever you are exposing is HTTP PR.
That one actually is bound to, you can only send request. And of course, that was just a quick prototype. So we should make explicit decisions, not just what I happen to do. But it was bound to, you could only make queries about actual connections that you have established to you.
I see.
Right.
So
then we'd have to start enforcing authorization policy on custom.
Yes. The question is it a secret information to find out, the IP address, given an IP address, find out who owns it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. Then we can keep the same restrictions. I mean, if it's an active connection or whatever John had before, or whatever we
That's
decided.
kind of awkward to do over DNS, right? How do you know?
It's the same thing.
I guess you know who's calling it, the destination. Yeah, I suppose it is.
We can restrict it only to local, local node and.
Okay. most enterprises treat everything in DNS as public information right within the enterprise.
That's why I said
And-
it.
So perhaps my earlier statement was a little strong. They probably shouldn't, but they also haven't caught up to that best practice. And it would be hard for us to be doing anything beyond that or restricting the behavior of the system beyond those expectations anyway. The question is how much information, right? The only information most people put in DNS is IP addresses and names.
Yeah, in GCP, for example, there is a PTR that you given an IP, you can find out the host name for a GCP VM. Rarely used, very few people know about it, but and in general, because there are some products where PTR requests are made part of their application. For example,
And you find out you can see the VM name.
Yeah, the host name. The host name.
Oh, yeah. Like host names and IPs are fine. Other resource identifying information is not fine.
Yeah, no, there's a number of RFCs to put some certificate information, especially for self-signed certificates. There is a lot of discussion on the internet for standard, but I agree with you. It's we may want to restrict as much as possible. I agree.
Okay, only if it's published, right? You have to choose to publish it.
Well, I guess like security aside, do we expect there to be use cases where you want to query arbitrary things, or only about your connections? Like I could see maybe your open telemetry collector and you want
Only
to
about
augment.
only about your connection, John. Let's keep it simple.
Okay, that's
That's a clear use case. I mean, we cannot avoid it because we need to know who you are talking about. Otherwise, it's a lost information.
Yeah, I don't have enough context to know whether a metadata server or DNS or some sort of syscall socket option magic thing is best. Maybe we do multiple and different.
Whatever we can get first, it's probably perfect.
Yeah.
But we need at least one. Okay, perfect.
I know we talked about this before. Are we going to start like the obvious one is some metadata server, right? API that's node local on some reserved endpoint. I guess we could start designing that and
Or John can merge the PR because he had an open PR.
Yeah, we did have a prototype. I mean, it was,
Okay.
It's boring.
Do you want to link?
Enough.
Do you want to link to the PR? Notes?
Yeah, let me try and find it. But basically, at a high level, it does. I think what you said, like we already redirect all traffic, so we just match on a magic IP, and then we forward it to our HTTP server that types over some information. I think you request I forget what your request on it. You say what IP and port or something that you're talking about, and it looks it up.
Right, it gives you back. Yeah. So we just need to review the metadata.
Yeah. Okay. Do you care about specifically exposing over DNS, Costin, or just that we do it in some way?
No, I was just thinking that sometimes, there are some existing applications that are actually doing this PTR lookup when they display the access log, for example, Apache or old Nginx and so forth. They have a way to show the host name in the access logs. And it is based by doing PTR requests because on the internet, you sometimes have it.
Yeah, I think we could do both if there's need, right? So I don't have a strong preference on
At some point,
MDS seems a bit. Yeah, I personally, with no evidence, MDS seems a bit like the one we should do first, and we can always do pointer later if we need to. Anything else we want to talk about today? Anything KubeCon related we discussed before that happens? Did anyone make the Ambient Mesh bingo card for KubeCon or? No? All right.
What ambient talks are at KubeCon?
At the, what's it called? Application Mesh Day, which I don't think is official. There's like 10. But that's like all ambient I saw. at Istio Day, I think there's one, which is me and Christian, that's called Is Ambient Mesh Secure? I saw which the answer will be yes, and go into more detail about why. Sorry to spoil. At Linkerd Day, there's a very humorous title, I think, that's like, Ambient Mesh is not secure. I don't know, it was really, just the way they worded it, I thought was very interesting. But it's basically like an anti-ambient mesh one, if you're interested in that. I think that's it. I don't think in the main, oh, actually there's a panel on
There's the
KubeCon.
panel, right?
Yeah, that is, I think the title is something like sidecars, proxyless, sidecarless, like what is the future of
Yeah,
service mesh? or
future
something
of
along those
serverless
lines.
mesh. Yeah, and also the Niraj has a maintainer session, right? So that's also going to talk about ambient. I believe somebody from Solo had a talk accepted right before the panel, talk about developmental model for ambient.
Maybe
So-
workshop, right? Is there a workshop?
No, we unfortunately don't have any workshop for ambient accepted. Well, there's a workshop at Application Networking Day, but nothing accepted as part of the KubeCon.
Yeah, it's okay. When is our next release again? Because that will
Next-
have, right? Because
Yeah, next month, right? May. I think they're already doing branch cutting this
Yeah,
week
so
or
the
last
branch
week.
cut was, well, I think it's supposed to be yesterday, but it got delayed a bit. So it should be any time now. And then 3 weeks or so is the release. So they kind of, ambient for KubeCon release was the 1.18 alpha build that we shipped.
No.
Just because of the timing.
Do we have
which
an
is-
Alpha 1 build, John, or we still use 0?
We don't. We could try and cut one real quick before KubeCon, although I'm a bit suspicious that there was some
Yeah.
regression that slipped in. because
Yeah, I'd rather not. If
I've
we
noticed
don't
a few
have build
issues that
now.
we
And
haven't-
we'll have a beta 1, right? Or a beta 0. We should have
yeah,
a beta 0
I mean,
after the
yeah,
branch.
we should typically once we cut the branch, we immediately after cut a beta branch. So that will probably happen before KubeCon. But if you're doing a
Okay.
demo, maybe test it well before you just don't switch on the day up from alpha to beta because.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, not so much stability, but if the people are going to go through tire kicking exercises, right? Because there's now doc and a build that will be publicly released with ztunnel in it. What are we collectively telling people to be looking at, and what are we collectively telling them? Don't worry, we know about that. We're going to fix it later.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do explicitly tell them, I think, how to get the alpha build so that they can
Yeah.
actually use it. And we do say that this is alpha and don't actually use in production, et cetera. But we don't have a list of known issues that they should ignore, which is probably a good idea.
And also a message we collectively as a community are saying to people who we've never met who are going to kick the tires. So we need to provide some guidance.
Yeah, I think one thing that could be useful as well is we have like a getting started with ambient mesh page on the docs now.
Okay.
It may be useful to put like a survey on there for
Mm.
feedback, not necessarily on like low levels, like I ran into a bug, which is probably just GitHub issue, but did you like it? Did you understand it? Is it useful? Or, higher level things.
Like, what else do you want to see? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or-
They
or-
do
or-
exactly what Cilium doing. Cilium did this like alpha release thing is singing note.
Yep.
And basically you can register to their beta or their alpha or something like that.
Ah.
And then you can do, yeah. And you can get a lot of information about what people think or want, which going to the maintainer.
So you're saying Cilium now supports, we can install it in Cilium or it's still not supported?
No. I'm saying that Cilium
Service mesh.
community,
Yeah.
yeah, they doing something like that. They can basically release it. And
Yeah,
Okay,
they
we
did
Remember
it.
they did
pile up there.
the private open source beta,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is quite the conceptual salad, which is not what we're doing. So, but we do want to gather some feedback. So like we can tell people to go to Slack, but that's probably too, right? What questions would we like them to answer? Like, do we want to compare it with their existing Cilio setup for like a sample workload? And right. What was their impression? Which I'm going to guess is going to be mostly resource footprint and capability focused, right? Which is the message. Does it meet your needs? Does it meet them the way you expected it to? I don't know. It's a lot hard to frame the questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we should work on the questions, maybe align it when 1.18 goes out. So it would be out in the next few weeks anyway. So then we can have the survey as part of the blog and also as part of our Get Started guide.
Do we want it by KubeCon though? If
And
we
we
try
always have the,
to push people to, I don't know if people are going to go install something at KubeCon or if they're going to decide it was really cool and then go home and install it. And we have a little bit of time.
We'll definitely have time.
What is the message on? Oh, sorry. Finish up.
Like, are we going to tell them to evaluate latency or bandwidth, right? Probably not.
No, yeah.
No, yeah.
Are we going to tell them to evaluate resource footprint? Probably yes.
API surface, I think that's a big one.
Yeah, it's a really big one. I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question.
Yeah, it's also a bit hard because we didn't actually fully implement what we proposed as the API with the parent ref attachment. Although it's pretty close. Like it's just syntax difference, but
Yeah, gamma, always.
Okay, so maybe the best thing to do for the short term is just tell them to show up in the Slack channel. Right? Is that right? But the good tire kickers, they're probably going to tell us something useful anyway. So maybe that's the best thing to do in the doc.
I think we're already doing that pretty much all of our blogs. We have like a get involved section, which we ask them to join our Slack channel.
Yeah, it's generic though, but we have a specific ambient feature, like how to getting started with ambient doc, which is not a blog.
Okay. Yeah, we can add a link at the end for that particular doc page.
Yeah, I might actually suggest we do it at the top, not at the bottom.
yeah, I feel like a survey would be like, I don't know if we've got much Slack feedback. I feel like a survey like specifically prompts you and then is potentially anonymous as well, which may attract some more people, but it doesn't need to be the first thing we do.
Yeah.
But
We could run the survey in Slack, right? It's actually.
That's also true. Yeah, we can stick it as the topic or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure between now and the end of the year or whenever we decide to ship GA, we'll have plenty of opportunity to get people to try it and give us feedback. So we just need to make sure that we're collecting it at some point in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if somebody really big is just trying to kick the tires with it, that's good. There's probably going to be good information coming from it. We can ask them to try things, right? Like AutoTrader, right, was our tester of like releases for so many years. Carl did such an amazing job and it really helped the project. Somebody like that showing up in Ambient said, look, I tested it for my real production environment and here's what was good and here's what was bad. Like that's definitely useful feedback. But yeah, we have plenty of time too. So okay, but collectively the message is test to see if it meets your needs. Evaluate the resource footprint. Performance is probably good enough for most use cases, but we know about some gaps that will be worked on before beta and GA. Is there anything else we want to say as directional guidance? It's good for getting MTLS turned on for all traffic in your cluster much more easily. So try that out. That's the use case we would suggest people focus on first, rather than trying to do and then do the L7 stuff. All right, so we're going to send that message as well. Yes, and generally, was it easier for you to do that step? Was it easier for you to install and maintain? An upgrade at some point, but maybe a bit early for that one. Okay. Listen, I don't care about GK. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, asleep.
No, I'm just teasing. I care lots about GK, actually. Alrighty. Well, how many people here are going to be at KubeCon? I know, like, we have the list of people talking. Yeah, here, give your thumbs up. Carsten, you're going to be there?
Yep, I have a talk with gRPC
Oh, nice.
Hot damn.
Friday.
Friday too. Okay.
Right, Friday. What time on Friday?
Oh, I need to check.
All right, so it looks about 5 or 6.
11
people.
a.m.
Oh, good. I'll
we
have
bookended
time to
then.
maybe cut. All right, what's
You
your
got
talk?
better than ours, Carsten. We got 4 p.m.
Yeah. I was going to say, isn't it like 4:55 for the panel?
It's the last one, I remember.
Yeah, I get the last panel during the conference, and I have the last booth presentation in the IBM booth on Friday.
Oh, nice. But the European KubeCon, I think it's very well attended. So on Friday, I'd expect still a good crowd.
I was going to say, I looked on Sched the other day, and I think it had 247 people said they were going to come to the panel,
Nice.
or at least it was on their schedule.
That's great. Nate, anybody from Aviatrix is going besides Mitch?
I think it's just Mitch, actually.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
You guys have a booth?
I think I'd have to ask Mitch. I haven't been paying attention.
All right. All right. We'll ping Mitch. Just trying to figure out how to find people.
It would be too much work for Mitch to man the booth, Louis.
Yeah. All right. We should probably create a channel in Slack for KubeCon just to facilitate meet and greets and things like that.
Yeah. And also, don't forget to sign out for the Istio booth. We still need people volunteer there if you're going. I know John, Eric, you already signed up, but maybe Carsten, Louis, and who else is going? Please sign up.
Yeah,
for
I'll
Istio
definitely.
too.
What's that, Carsten?
Oh, please sign me up. I don't know where to sign up, but if you have a sheet, send me a link.
Oh yeah,
I'm
it's
sorry.
on the announcement channel. I just sent it today, so
Okay.
there's a link.
I'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll definitely sign up. I just don't know when. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out my schedule. So.
Yep. Thank you. All right. I think we're done.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Yeah. See you guys next week. Some of you. Bye now.
Later, guys.
Okay.